Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report Radio, Tuesdays and Thursday nights here on the great Logos Radio Network. In the wings, okay? We've got Webster Griffin Tarpley. I'm going to bring him on right now. One more thing, though, before that happens. Please, we want to press this. If you go to logosradionetwork.com, we could use your help right now. We're doing a fundraiser, and we need to raise shortly $1,000 or so for the new computer system that we had to get. And by the first of the year, we're looking to raise a total of $7,000. Anything $5, $10 or more would be much, much appreciated. Thank you very much, and you'll keep the flow of the show going. Now, speaking of flow of the show, all right, we've got on the line Dr. Tarpley. He's ready to go. He's got a new book he wants to tell us about, all about Romney and Mormonism, and I'm sure a lot more. Webster, welcome back to I.N.N. World Report Radio.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good to be here.
Webster, I'm just going to hand you the mic, brother, because whenever you're on the show, you just take it and run with it. So tell us, what's the deal with the new book?
Well, first of all, how can you get it, right? If anything about this is found interesting during the course of the broadcast, you need to go to progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com, located in Palm Desert, California now. And what you find there is Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. And the subtitle is Polygamy, Theocracy and Subversion. So Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of the United States, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Now, you can get an ebook version of this for as little as $6. So there's every reason to get this. The paper copy costs a little bit more. Those will be shipping now within a few days, but the ebook is already there. And I urge you to use this to educate the American people. Let me just preface this. I put out 2 books denouncing Obama. When it was time to try to stop Obama, I tried to stop Obama, and I gave it everything I could. And unfortunately, we didn't stop Obama. Now, there are many indications that the ruling class, the Wall Street elite, have now put themselves on the side of Romney. And you have to understand this, right? And it will not do to fight the battles of 4 years ago now. There's every indication of a ruling class consensus to put Romney in the White House. And this would have, on the one side, he'd be bringing the warmonger neocons. The neocon fascist madmen would make a comeback in grand style. And people that have been fighting along these fronts for, a decade or more, you know what that means. That means almost guaranteed foreign war within the first year or 18 months. On the other side, there's this question of genocidal austerity, killer cuts. The idea that we've got about 50 million Americans who live really on food stamps and not much else because they have no job, no unemployment benefits. They have no medical care. There's no more welfare. They're just living on food stamps and hoping they can survive until they get Social Security and Medicare or maybe Medicaid. Romney wants to make a frontal assault on all of that. In other words, I call it genocide against the American people, and I think that's the point where you've got to stand up and fight. Now, the complicating factor is this question of Mormonism, which has been pretty much swept under the rug because the craven, cowardly Democratic Party, hoping that Wall Street will return its favors to them, have been completely silent on this issue. And it's really very interesting. Right? It's also a question of political correctness. But just look at it this way. If Obama is the president, he does not have a dedicated faction of diehard supporters that will go down the line for him. But Romney does. And it's called the CIA and FBI Mormon Mafia. There is a Mormon Mafia faction that cuts across the U.S. federal government. It is very sinister. Part of it comes from the fact that young Mormon men go overseas for 2 years. They learn a foreign language. They come back. They apply to the CIA and the FBI, the CIA especially because of the foreign languages. And they write down that they don't drink, they don't smoke. They have very conservative or reactionary views, right? They're straight arrows, clean living, no coffee, no booze, right? You get the drill. And they go right into the CIA. And as long as Henry Kissinger was there, and this was the dominant figure from, the late 60s until well into the 80s and 90s. He had a right-hand man, and that was Brent Scowcroft, a top Mormon. And this Scowcroft would make sure that the plum jobs went to the Mormons. So we now have a stratum of high-level officials in the CIA and the intelligence community in general who are dedicated to Romney, and they feel that Romney will represent the coronation of their careers. They're in a symbiosis with Romney. This is something that Obama simply doesn't have, and it makes Romney more dangerous and more formidable. Now, let me also point out, I'm not here selling the lesser evil. My point of view is the United Front Against Austerity, and we're meeting in New York City on October 27th, and we're against both. We don't like Romney, we don't like Obama, and we're doing something about it, right? We're meeting to try to put together some kind of line of resistance, because there's going to be, really no matter who wins, there's going to be an attempt for another round of killer cuts against the American people in December. That's going to be the so-called grand bargain during the lame duck session under the shadow of this idiotic fiscal cliff that all the idiots are babbling about. They're going to try to strip the American people of their economic rights. Well, we say no to all of that. So that's in passing. But in the meantime, I feel that I've done everything I can to educate people about about Obama. And now I'm contributing a substantial book to learning something about Romney. Let me maybe just start with one or 2 points, and then Tom, you join in. Here, let's just take the beginning of my book. Everybody remembers now Romney's tirade against the 47%, right? That half the American people are parasites, they're ne'er-do-wells, they're robbing the public treasury. He doesn't see that for corporate welfare or Wall Street bailouts. No. He goes to a bunch of fat cats and tells them that it's the 47%, they're irresponsible, and so forth. And we have this columnist, E.J. Dionne, in the Washington Post, and this was, I thought, the best answer to the 47%. Although he really doesn't give an answer. He gives a question. E.J. Dionne says that he was talking to a conservative friend of his, a right-winger, who said, the question for Romney, and he says, if I were you, I'd wonder why Romney hates America so much. Why Romney hates America so much. Now, this is a chilling question, because we've seen this before with Obama. Remember, Obama said the jobs went away 25 years ago, and now they're out there clinging bitterly to guns, religion, anti-trade, and prejudice against people who are different. That was Obama's version of oligarchical class consciousness. But now with Romney, we've got this one about the 47%, which I would submit is more intense. And the reason, my answer to this question, why Romney hates America so much, is that there is a Mormon narrative of persecution, they claim, by the United States and the American people, and indeed of hatred and vendetta against the American people. And this is the kind of person, and we've seen it with Obama, you don't want to put somebody like this in the White House. Now, specifically, in every Mormon temple until about 1927, they had a liturgy, right? What we would call a liturgy in Christianity. But in Mormonism, which is separate from Christianity, of course, they call it a temple endowment. Okay, fine. So in this temple endowment, up until the late 1920s, meaning that George Romney, the father of the current candidate, would have sworn this for, the first 20 years plus of his life. It's a pledge called the Oath of Vengeance. And it says, I swear to exact blood vengeance against the United States and the American people because they killed Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith back in 1844, which, of course, was an outrageous crime done by a mob in Illinois. But the Mormons have chosen to incorporate this into this narrative or story or ideology, discourse, whatever you want to call it, an ideology of resentment and persecution against the United States. And you can look in Romney's own books. He says, my relatives fled to Mexico to avoid religious persecution. Well, what the hell does that mean? What he really means is they fled to Mexico because they preferred polygamy to the United States of America. He's very patriotic these days, isn't he? He's such a patriot. But his family story is that in his family values, polygamy trumps the United States, right? Forget patriotism. If you can practice polygamy in Mexico, then viva Mexico. And they would have stayed there. There was no plan for them to come back, except that Pancho Villa and his revolutionary army came along in the state of Chihuahua and drove them out. And they have a special story about that too. They said that the Mexican Revolution was based on envy, that the people following Pancho Villa were so choked with envy that they wanted to steal everything that these Mormon colonists had put together. So if you saw PBS Frontline, I guess it is, the other night, there were two hours on the parallel lives of Romney and Obama. And the part about Romney, they had David Brooks of the New York Times come on there and say, Romney has this whole story about his Mormon faith and the adventures of his family going back to Parley Pratt back in the 1830s and 1840s. But he doesn't dare tell it because it's all about polygamy. Well, I think that's something we have a right to know. And when you have a church that has polygamy, right, the most extreme anti-woman ideology, right, war on women to the 10th degree, right, with polygamy. When you have a church that for most of its existence refused to admit blacks, right, it was a racist church and tended to attract racists. It tended to become top-heavy with racists until about a little bit before 1980. When you have a church that starts off being against Freemasons and then becomes Freemasonic itself to the nth degree, these are relevant political questions, which I think people have a right to hear answered.
Well, of course, leave it to Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley to dig this up. We're going to take a quick break, friends. As you can hear, we're just getting warmed up. We've got another 45 minutes yet to go with Webster Tarpley. We'll tell you about his book again, and we'll be right back after this. All right, good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report Radio. No shortage of fireworks whenever Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley is in the house, and he's got a load here. He's got a new book. We're going to get to that in 1 second. Before I do, there's two more points of order. Please, if you can find it within your heart, we're asking for a little bit of help right now to sustain the network. Go to logosradionetwork.com. There is a chip in button. We need to raise some money. We just had to spend $1,000 on a new computer. And frankly, if we could raise $7,000 by the end of the year, that would be a huge shot in the arm, and it would help things out greatly. And do not hesitate if you think, gee, all I can do is $5 or $10. Everything is greatly, greatly appreciated. We want you to lay your hands on this effort if you can. Now then, we're going back to Dr. Tarpley. Before we do, though, Webster, you asked me a question about what you were saying. That seems like the classic volatile cocktail. Get a group of people with a chip on their shoulder, get a minority group of people who feel like they've been put down, and a bigger group of elites that have a job to do hires them and says, you know what, we're going to raise you up, and go ahead. You can take it out on it. The British Empire did it over and over again, didn't they?
And this is the British Empire. In other words, the Mormons are an artifact of the British Empire. I guess I have to tell you this story now before we get to Benghazi. In Paris in the late 1980s, I knew one of the most distinguished scholars of religion in the world. It was Ali Mazaheri. And he was a professor at the School of Advanced Social Studies. He was the most eminent Iranian scholar working in Europe from about 1940 until his death about 1990. So Mazaheri would say there were three miracles of the Victorian age. One was Karl Marx, British agent. Another was the Bab, the founder of Baha'i, also in his view a British agent. And Joseph Smith, British asset, if not agent. And what we find with this is that Joseph Smith may well have been, now this is a founder of Mormonism, right? Near Rochester, New York, around 1830. He claims to find these golden plates. The angel Moroni, he gets the Book of Mormon out of this, starts a church. Within about 5 years, an emissary from London comes to him, and it's an emissary from the Catholic Apostolic Church in Barnsley, England. But that leads back to the Caledonian church in London of a guy called Edward Irving, or had been of Edward Irving, which was a congregation attended by the Foreign Secretary George Canning, by all kinds of British elites, Coleridge, the drug poet, Thomas de Quincey, the English opium eater. The whole London elite for a certain period frequented this Pentecostal, charismatic church. And in many ways, the Mormons have to be seen as a spin-off of this. In particular, it's very interesting to see John Stuart Mill in On Liberty going out of his way to argue that the Mormons should be left alone. And he comes up with crazy stories. He says, if there are women there living in polygamy, it's because this is what they want. Now, at that time in the 1840s and 50s, all around the world, you could read lurid stories, escape from Utah, escape from Brigham Young, because a lot of women, when they got there, wanted to get out, and they couldn't. There was no way until the railroad came in 1867 or so. There was no way to get out of Utah if Brigham Young didn't want you to leave. But John Stuart Mill explicitly defended the Mormons in On Liberty. Go back and look at it. And another one is Thomas Carlyle, the famous Victorian man of letters and fascist. He was one of Hitler's favorite writers. He's a proto-fascist from any number of points of view. I dug up from a very obscure journal an unpublished essay by Thomas Carlyle about the Mormons, where he says Brigham Young is the dictator that we need for the coming period. In other words, he's already looking at him as a precursor of Mussolini and people like this. So my finding is that the Mormons were maybe not created, but after about 5 years at the most, they became a sponsored asset of the British East India Company. And here's the big thing. In 1835, this British guy comes to meet Joseph Smith. In 1837, Joseph Smith sends his first group of leaders to Britain. And in 1839, he then sends Brigham Young and the whole leadership, the entire quorum of the 12, as they're called, all went to Britain to set up a massive recruiting operation, which is where the Mormons got their numbers. In other words, the Mormons, fundamentally by about 1850, they're not American. There's nothing American about them. It's all British, and they all hate the U.S. They called them the damned Americans or the Gentiles. This is another. I'd like to hear what Romney has to say about this. Right, your church calls Americans the Gentiles and still does, or the damned Americans, and you can see the quotes in my book. So the recruiting, the basis of the Mormon Church in numbers is provided by Great Britain. Now, that was a police state then as it is now. And you just couldn't do that. You couldn't go there, right? And recruit and print a newspaper and print, prayer books and the Book of Mormon and all this other stuff. You couldn't do that unless the elite decided that you were going to be allowed to do it. And in this case, they were delighted because the idea was—
Unless the elite decided that you were going to further their cause.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is. And what's their cause? This came up just a second ago, is that they're planning for Southern secessionism, right? They got the Confederate States of America are already on the drawing board in London. People like Lord Palmerston, Lord John Russell, Gladstone, the rest of them. The top British foreign policy elite were planning to promote Southern secessionism, but then they wanted another front. And if you look at Utah, it's perfect. The Transcontinental Railroad would have to go through Utah. The telegraph, the Transcontinental Telegraph, which did get created in 1861-62, that also had to go through Utah. So the Mormons are sitting astride the main east-west channel of communication. And the idea is the Mormons attempt secession, Utah territory, not even a state, but a territory, attempt secession in 1857 to 58. And it's in this moment that they kill about 130 Arkansas pioneers who are just peaceful people with wagons going through from Arkansas to California. That's all it is. And the Mormons killed them. That's the infamous Mountain Meadows Massacre. And Mike Leavitt, the current transition boss for Romney. His ancestors are up to their neck in that massacre. So this is one attempt at secession. What Brigham Young thought he was doing in 1857-58, he thought he was timing with the bleeding Kansas, right? This sort of low-grade civil war in Kansas. He thought that would explode. And above all, John Brown's raid. He apparently thought John Brown's raid was going to occur a little bit sooner. And the hope that John Brown had was that would trigger a general uprising, a slave rebellion. And that's when Brigham Young said, well, then they're going to be tied up. I can make my move to secessionism. And the goal of that would have been to cut off California, right? Already a state, very important state in the Union. They would have tried to cut that off. Then, a little bit later, during the Civil War itself, 1861 to 65, the U.S. sends in a very small garrison, and it's a very interesting story. The colonel of this garrison is an Irish Catholic, and it couldn't be more ironic, right? That these Mormons with their, raving stuff about, Church of Rome, Antichrist, they have to knuckle under eventually to this Irish Catholic. And the Irish Catholic sends back reports, which I think are classics. This is a real important patriot. His name is Connor. His name is really O'Connor, but he makes it into Connor because he's up against, prejudice at the time. So Colonel Connor says Brigham Young is waiting his chance. If, for example, if the Union loses the Battle of Antietam or Gettysburg, and above all, if the British and the French intervene, if they invade, that's when Brigham Young will make his move to stab the United States in the back. And you can get the quotes. Brigham Young says, Abraham Lincoln is a cursed scoundrel. And you have lots and lots of quotes from the Mormons saying, oh, these Americans, they deserve what they're getting. North and South, they're all no good because they killed our man Joseph Smith, and now they're getting just what they deserve. So there's a schadenfreude about the hundreds of millions of dead of the American Civil War, which I think is shocking. And one of the things this shows you is how far this is from Christianity, right? Because it's a faith, it's a denomination obsessed with revenge and violence, right? There's no moment of forgiveness or charity in any of this.
Well, it all sounds very fascinating, Webster. I know that if you're talking about it, it's very, very well researched. I'm sure that's in the book too. How to get the book real quick before we go off the air?
ProgressivePress.com. Go to ProgressivePress.com, and it's called Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover America. Paper copy available and immediate delivery on the ebook, $6. You can't go wrong.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report Radio. You cannot make this stuff up, number one. Number two, it's coming from our guest, Dr. Webster Tarpley, so it must be very, very well researched. Number three, this is not, an anti-Romney thing to boost up Obama. Pox on both their houses. I know that is the position that Webster Tarpley takes. Number four, send me an email, info@innradio.com. Number five, please, if you find it in your heart, please visit logosradionetwork.com and hit that chip in button. We need to raise some money right now. We need to buy a new computer, and we'd like to raise $7,000 between now and the end of the year to keep this kind of radio coming at you. I ran out of numbers. Number six, Webster Tarpley, back to him now. He's got a book that we'll talk about again. And then number seven, Webster, I have another point. Let me ask you something. From your research, is it possible to ascertain if Mr. Smith, who started the Mormon religion over here, had this kind of grand vision when he did it? Or was he a small-time operator who was a con man or something, or operator who was then taken advantage of by the British? Or was this guy a big thinker from day one, and he was going to go shop his ideas around with the British or the South or whoever wanted to cause some trouble?
Well, in the case of the British obviously made him great. And it's parallel to some other things, right? Often forgotten. At the same time that Joseph Smith is proclaiming a theocratic government of the Mormons, it's separate from the United States, he claims to revere the Constitution, but he wants to set up a theocratic government, which is the dictatorship of Joseph Smith, later of Brigham Young, which violates the Constitution. I just have to say, the modern reactionary world outlook, the sort of libertarian, reactionary world outlook, the kind of thing we saw with say, Ron Paul. This outlook owes a tremendous amount to the Mormons, and here's how they do it. The theory is we love the Constitution. The Constitution is divinely inspired, but we hate the United States government and everything about it, everything, and we hate every U.S. federal official, and they better not come here because otherwise we'll make them into catfish bait or we'll use them up. These are typical Brigham Young expressions in particular. At the same time that you have the Mormons in the U.S., there's this interesting phenomenon. In China, somebody else is proclaiming that he's the younger brother of Jesus Christ. In the case of Joseph Smith, he practically proclaims that he's better than Jesus Christ. He says he outdid Jesus Christ. That's Joseph Smith. But in China, we have this guy Hong who says, I'm the younger brother of Jesus Christ. And this is this Taiping Rebellion. And the Taiping Rebellion is simply the biggest military event of the 19th century. It's bigger than the Napoleonic Wars, bigger than the American Civil War, bigger than any of them. And the death toll of the Taiping Rebellion is between 20 and 30 million, based on this guy saying, I'm the younger brother of Jesus Christ. So, and that's a theocracy, right? And the capital of that is Nanjing, and they burn cities and they burn crops, and the result is significant genocide, right? 30 million dead, I guess, counts as genocide. So
hey, a million here, a million there. Pretty soon you're talking genocide.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, though. All right, so that's that. Now, in the case of Joseph Smith, right? He is a small town hustler. He is convicted, and it's not me. It's the state of New York talking. The state of New York found him guilty of being a disorderly person and an imposter, because he goes around and he tells these stupid farmers, I've got a special stone and I can find gold on your property, but hire me and I'll find gold. And of course, there's always some reason why he can't find the gold. So the state of New York has branded him. He's a convicted, maybe not a felon, but he's convicted of hoaxer before he starts this stuff, right? So then he gets into the religious racket. And I give a kind of a background for this, right? Rochester, New York is the so-called burned over area where they've had so many revivals. They've had the Great Awakening, the Great Revival. They've had all this stuff, and it just leaves them all completely cynical and disoriented. The idea, though, is that Joseph Smith is a genius as a mountebank and a charlatan. He is one of the greatest. I would rank him maybe with Cagliostro, the Venetian, right, who had this ability to do mass hypnosis, as people say. But in the case of Joseph Smith, here's what I think it is, and it applies to Romney too. Joseph Smith, you can read the interesting biography by Fawn Brody. There's a woman who was excommunicated by the Mormon Church because she wrote a relatively factual biography of Joseph Smith. In this, she suggests that he has multiple personalities going on. In other words, you could not be just a huckster, just a hustler, mountebank, and charlatan. There had to be something more. And the idea is multiple personalities. And I must say, I can bring some personal experience to some of these things, right? Looking at leaders of this type and this question of multiple personality phenomena. I think this is also Romney, but Joseph Smith for sure. Here's the idea with Joseph Smith. He's got many personalities. He's got many wives. He's between 30 and 80 wives. Maybe the average estimate is about 50 to 55 wives. He goes to his grave denying that he was a polygamist at all. But he's got many personalities, many wives, and his theology is that there's a multiplicity of worlds, of planets. I think this is Giordano Bruno, the Venetian asset, I guess, in my book, the plurality of worlds, right? What he's saying is there are these many planets, right? Kolob being the principal one, not this one, but Kolob, and many gods. This is a polytheistic system. So you have polygamy, polytheism, plus the many planets and the many personalities. And this I think is it is not healthy, put it that way. Now, when you look at Romney, right, and people have been wondering this from that debate last week, how is it that Romney can lie with such ease, right? It's just effortless for him. A lot of people, you can see politicians, they lie, they feel bad, they have a conscience, they get verklempt, right? It ties them up a little bit. They babble, they misspeak. Romney, it's just, the flip-flopping, the etch-a-sketch, right? He's famous for this, lying, flip-flopping, etch-a-sketch. Where does that come from? My question is, does he have multiple personalities? Is he mobilizing, like one personality comes out to talk to the Tea Party and another personality comes out to try to win over the independents in a national debate? And I think there's a justifiable reason for asking whether this is built into the theology, right? Because the advantage of monotheism, it seems to me, is very large compared to the others, right? We're talking Judaism, Islam, Christianity.
Well, it certainly saves you a lot of money when it comes to, going to the temples all over town and making different sacrifices, doesn't it?
Right. I think, but it seems to me, this is the monotheism is supposedly the discovery of Akhenaten, right? Akhenaten in Egypt, a little bit earlier than Moses, or somewhat earlier. He says it's going to be the disk of the sun from now on, right? That thing you see in the sky, it's going to be that and nothing else, right? We're not going to have this pantheon of different
Akhenaten says to everybody, Oi, why do I got to bring 10 bulls, one to each temple, and sacrifice each one? We got to downsize here. We got austerity. We got to bring one bull to one temple. That's it.
Well, and Moses, the idea is always that Moses may have somehow been able to benefit from the Egyptian discovery of monotheism. Anyway, I would bet on monotheism myself, right? I think this is on the whole better, because what that is saying is that there's a single universe and it's lawful. In other words, they're not a series of sub-universes.
Whereas reality,
reality is one. Reality is unitary, and that's, I think, very important for science. I think it's extremely important. In the case of Mormonism, though, there are multiple planets, and on this kolob, they have a pantheon where there are many gods, right? That they're just innumerable gods. There are millions of gods. Your ancestors have presumably become gods if they did the right thing, and you get a harem to go with that, and so forth. So,
wait a minute, I thought the harems were only reserved for the martyrs of the jihadist movement.
No,
wait a second.
No, I'm sorry. The Mormon system was harem, and this is another interesting one, right? About the lying, right? Is that from about 1830 to 1852, the Mormons practiced polygamy, but they denied it. Then in 1852, they said, surprise, surprise, we've been practicing polygamy all along. From 1852 to 1890, out there in Utah, they practice it and proclaim it. And they say, you want to be a polygamist? You want to have a harem? Come to us. This is the place, right? That's Brigham Young. This is the place to have a harem. And then in 1890, they're about to be expropriated by the U.S. government. They're about to have all their property seized, saying you can't violate the federal law against polygamy. It's like RICO, right? You violate the statute. They were about to have it seized. Then they get a new revelation that polygamy is abolished if it violates the laws of the land. That's when the Romneys were in Mexico. They fled to Mexico because the ability of Mexico to enforce anti-polygamy laws was minimal. So they fled.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiely. We're going to take a quick break. Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley in the house. A hard look at Mormonism. And by extension, perhaps the guy running for president, Mitt Romney. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. Taking a quick break. Back with Webster. All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report Radio. Tuesdays and Thursday nights here on the great Logos Radio Network. Please, friends, drop by the network's website, logosradionetwork.com. We could use your help right now if you could spare something, it would be much, much appreciated. Even $5, $10. We're trying to raise $1,000 right away because we had a server that blew up and we just had to buy another one. And between now and the end of the year, if we could raise $7,000, it would mean a big, big help to the network. Then we can continue bringing you great programming like this. I'm going to get out of the way. Webster Griffin Tarpley is going to finish up a fascinating expose on Mormonism and Mitt Romney by extension. Webster, one more time, where do we get the book from?
It's progressivepress.com out there in California. And you're looking for Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy and Subversion. So Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America from progressivepress.com. Paper copy, you can order it. It'll ship within a couple of days. But the ebook, $6. And I can't imagine anybody not buying it for $6, because that I believe you get just about immediately.
Very good. Okay, then why don't you finish up? Why don't you tell us about the White Horse prophecy?
Yeah, look, this is the thing now. If you look at Time magazine, they did a cover story last week about the Mormon identity. It's like a stained glass window with Romney.
I bet it was very stained if Time magazine did it.
Well, it was a cover-up, right? It tried to make Romney look like a pragmatist, right? Mormons are pragmatists. No, they're not. Sorry. That may be the surface, but that's not the essence. Then we've also had this Frontline PBS the other night, essentially whitewash. Here's the thing. For these kinds of people, especially PBS, right? Oh, they're so horrified by George W. Bush, right? Bush the younger, because he, of course, thought that he had this direct line to God, and he felt, as he told French President Chirac, that the point of this war was to destroy Iraq because they were the enemies of the chosen people, the Israelis, and so forth. And Chirac was mystified. We got this reprinted in the Washington Post a couple of days ago here. But here's the thing now. If George W. Bush thought he had this direct line to God, right? And he said, I didn't ask my father, I asked my higher father, remember? What about Romney? Now, I'm telling you, Romney is bringing with him these neocons. He's bringing John Bolton. And I just want to pause for a second. You want to know who made that film? That film was important. The Islamophobia film. That film was the basis of demonstrations in 25 countries. Don't tell me it's not important. It was not the basis of the killing of the ambassador, but it's a key thing for every place else. Pakistan, Egypt, right? All of that was based on the film. So Rush Limbaugh should shut his pie hole telling us that the film is not important. They don't want you to think about the film because the film is important, and ultimately the Romney campaign is behind the film, and it works like this. They blame this poor guy, Akula, Coptic Christian from Egypt. He's a little schmo. He's a patsy. The person who really ran that studio, who got the permit, did all the stuff, knows how to make movies, is a guy called Joseph Nasrallah. And he's a Coptic Christian activist ultimately from Egypt. He's Islamophobic and what have you. He's part of a network. And people in New York know this as the Islamophobia Network. Some people know it around the name of Pamela Geller. They are the people who did the big campaign about the Ground Zero Mosque. Huge hysteria, remember. And these crazy posters that have gone up in the subway that Muslims are savages, right? This is all the Islamophobia Network. The problem is, who is the Islamophobia Network really? Who's the dominant personality? Well, you can see from their demonstration, September 11th, 2010, it is John Bolton. John Bolton, formerly top State Department official under Bush the Younger. John Bolton just happens to be the top foreign policy advisor to Romney, and he is a likely candidate to be Secretary of State. So you want to
got to be kidding. That is not that's not Secretary of anything.
Secretary of State. He came close. He was a UN ambassador. The tradition is now that you go from UN ambassador to Secretary of State. That's what this awful Susan Rice is hoping for, although maybe this latest escapade has cooked her goose. That I don't know. But John Bolton, Elliot Cohen, Dan Senior, who's telling little Ryan what to do. Anything Ryan says tonight about foreign policy will come from the brain of Dan Senior. He was the spokesman for the Coalition Provisional Authority. Remember the occupation, that disaster? He was in charge with presenting that to the world. You've got, as I said, Elliot Cohen. You got Robert Joseph. Robert Joseph injected the 16 deadly words, Saddam Hussein is looking for yellow cake in Niger. Okay? He did that. And Robert Kagan of the famous Klan, right? His brother was the architect of the surge in Afghanistan, a bloody failure, as we see. So you get the idea, right? So Romney will be bringing those neocons. On the other side, he'll be bringing Mormons. And the top Mormon is Mike Leavitt, former governor of Utah. Very dirty. And this is the guy who did the corruption in the Salt Lake City 2012 Olympics. The reason that Romney went in there was to cover up for a number of top Mormons, including Leavitt, according to published reports, and according to Romney's own book called Turnaround. That's what he was up to. So it's going to be a narrow government. Neocons on the foreign policy, domestic and economic, will be Mormons. Now,
sounds like the Brits make out every way around, huh?
You're out of it, right? Because if you are not part of the Mormon moment, right? Most of us, there is no Mormon moment. So that's it's about 1%, whatever it is. It's a government by the 1%.
There it goes again, that magic number, the 1%, right?
But now let me just get to this question about Mad Dog Bush Jr. Now he was bad, but now when you see Romney coming in there, we have to figure the White Horse prophecy. The White Horse prophecy is the most detailed future prophecy that we know of from Joseph Smith, and it's from 1843, 1844, and the last phase of Joseph Smith's life. And he essentially says there's going to be a huge crisis. The Constitution of the United States will hang by a thread. This phraseology, hang by a thread. The Constitution hangs by a thread. He says, what's going to happen with that? The White Horse will come in from the Rocky Mountains, will take over the United States and lead the United States to world conquest. And the White Horse means the Mormons. And it's not, it's even more detailed.
What do you think the Chinese think about that?
We have them in there. They're included. The heathen Chinese are included as a target, but you gotta let me get to it. The White Horse prophecy says that the White Horse of the Mormons and the Red Horse of the British Empire, right, red, will unite against the Pale Horse. And that's us. We're the Pale Horse. The United States, the Americans, are the Pale Horse. And this is then going to lead to a world dominated by the White Horse, the Mormons, and the Red Horse, until eventually the Red Horse is going to be sucked in and absorbed by the White Horse. Along the way, there are going to be some conflicts. One of them is, as he says, the danger that the Chinese are coming into California, the heathen Chinese, says Joseph Smith, which is, it's really British racist language, right? It's from the Fu Manchu series a little bit later. But then the final struggle, right? Armageddon. What's Armageddon? Is between this Mormon White Horse, which has now absorbed most of the world, and the Tsar of Russia. And there we see Romney with that lunatic remark that Russia is the main strategic foe of the United States. What's up with that? That's thermonuclear war. That's beyond Bush's wildest dreams. Bush was going around picking on the little guys, right? Let's be clear. Picking on countries that were more or less defenseless. You go after Russia, my God, what are you doing? That's thermonuclear World War III right there. That's built into the White Horse prophecy. Now, what's the relation of Mitt to the White Horse prophecy? Just that, and you can see this in the book. His entire life, he has been celebrated since he was the son of the most important elected Mormon official in the U.S., Michigan Governor George Romney, who was then in the Nixon cabinet, a couple of posts in the Nixon cabinet. Mitt Romney is supposed to be the vehicle to realize this White Horse prophecy. And again, as soon as you hear somebody saying the Constitution hangs by a thread, run. And that's where this crazy double thing kicks in. They love the Constitution, but they hate the United States government, and it's got to be replaced by a theocracy. Now, notice that this is similar to Al-Qaeda, right? What's with Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda says all governments are illegitimate because they're not the caliphate. Only the caliphate is acceptable. And we have, Joseph Smith, but how about Parley Pratt, Mitt Romney's great-great-grandfather, saying the same thing, that any attempt at self-government is blasphemy. You've got to have the kingdom of God under God's prophet. That's Joseph Smith. There's no room here for democracy. Joseph Smith later ran for president, mainly to block Henry Clay, the main patriot of the time, right? The American system guy. Joseph Smith ran for president. He said his platform was theo-democracy. Sorry, there's no theo-democracy.
Interesting. Well, Webster, we'll have you back on soon. One more time for the book?
Absolutely. Next week if you want. It's progressivepress.com. progressivepress.com, and the book is Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. Read all about polygamy. That's always interesting. Theocracy, equally, and subversion, including secessionism and racism, too. It goes on and on.
This kind of stuff, it's sad but true. It's history. It'd be interesting to hear people try to distance themselves and deny it, but fat chance. Anyway, thank you very much, Webster. Thank you, Gerard. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report, back with you next Tuesday night. Have a great weekend. Tom Kiely, I.N.N. World Report Radio, Tuesdays and Thursday nights here on the great Logos Radio Network. In the wings, okay? We've got Webster Griffin Tarpley. I'm going to bring him on right now. One more thing, though, before that happens. Please, we want to press this. If you go to logosradionetwork.com, we could use your help right now. We're doing a fundraiser, and we need to raise shortly $1,000 or so for the new computer system that we had to get. And by the first of the year, we're looking to raise a total of $7,000. Anything $5, $10 or more would be much, much appreciated. Thank you very much, and you'll keep the flow of the show going. Now, speaking of flow of the show, all right, we've got on the line Dr. Tarpley. He's ready to go. He's got a new book he wants to tell us all about Romney and Mormonism, and I'm sure a lot more. Webster, welcome back to I.N.N. World Report Radio.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good to be here.
Webster, I'm just going to hand you the mic, brother, because whenever you're on the show, you just take it and run with it. So tell us, what's the deal with the new book?
Well, first of all, how can you get it, right? If anything about this is found interesting during the course of the broadcast, you need to go to progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com, located in Palm Desert, California now. And what you find there is Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. And the subtitle is Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. So Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of the United States, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Now, you can get an ebook version of this for as little as $6. So there's every reason to get this up and fight. Now, the complicating factor is this question of Mormonism, which has been pretty much swept under the rug because the craven, cowardly Democratic Party, hoping that Wall Street will return its favors to them, have been completely silent on this issue. And it's really very interesting. Right? It's also a question of political correctness. But just look at it this way. If Obama is the president, he does not have a dedicated faction of diehard supporters that will go down the line for him. But Romney does, and it's called the CIA and FBI Mormon Mafia. There is a Mormon Mafia faction that cuts across the U.S. federal government. It is very sinister. Part of it comes from the fact that young Mormon men go overseas for 2 years. They learn a foreign language. The paper copy costs a little bit more. Those will be shipping now within a few days, but the ebook is already there. And I urge you to use this to educate the American people. Let me just preface this. I put out 2 books denouncing Obama. When it was time to try to stop Obama, I tried to stop Obama, and I gave it everything I could. And unfortunately, we didn't stop Obama. Now, there are many indications that the ruling class, the Wall Street elite, have now put themselves on the side of Romney. And you have to understand this, right? And it will not do to fight, the battles of 4 years ago now. There's every indication of a ruling class consensus to put Romney in the White House. And this would have, on the one side, he'd be bringing the warmonger neocons. The neocon fascist madmen would make a comeback in grand style. And people that have been fighting along these fronts for, a decade or more, what that means. That means almost guaranteed foreign war within the first year or 18 months. On the other side, there's this question of genocidal austerity, killer cuts. The idea that we've got about 50 million Americans who live really on food stamps and not much else because they have no job, no unemployment benefits. They have no medical care. There's no more welfare. They're just living on food stamps and hoping they can survive until they get Social Security and Medicare or maybe Medicaid. Romney wants to make a frontal assault on all of that. In other words, I call it genocide against the American people, and I think that's the point where you've got to stand up.